Ex-husband and his wife demanded custody of my daughter after abandoning her for 8 months. I, 33F, was married for 8 years to my ex-husband, Peter, 39M. We got divorced a year ago after he confessed that he'd been having an extramarital affair with his ex-girlfriend from college for about 3 years. I hadn't seen that coming at all, especially since Peter and I had a 4-year-old daughter. For him to have an affair with his ex, even after having a daughter, was unbelievable for me. But it was true, and we ended up getting divorced. I decided to raise our daughter on my own. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Peter married his ex-girlfriend, Mandy, 30F. I found out about their wedding from his friends because, naturally after the divorce, we didn't keep in touch. I also managed to get full custody of our daughter, and Peter only visited her on the weekends under my supervision. However, after his wedding, he stopped visiting altogether. I was fine with that because it meant no more awkward silences when he tried to interact with our daughter while I stayed in the room, desperately trying not to kick him out. Peter had visited a few weekends during the divorce proceedings, and I allowed it because our daughter seemed to enjoy spending time with him. But once he stopped visiting, I didn't reach out to him again. It's been almost a year since our divorce was finalized, and the last time I saw him was about 8 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. Since then, I've focused on work and raising our daughter, as that's all I had to do. Last weekend, Peter showed up at my door unexpectedly, and it was an intense interaction. When I opened the door and saw him there, I thought he was there to meet our daughter, but he told me that he was there to talk to me. I found this strange, considering we hadn't had any communication in nearly a year, but I told him to continue. He then told me that his wife, Mandy, was planning to press charges against me unless I gave them full custody of our daughter. She felt that, as a single mother, I wouldn't be able to provide for her as well as they could, and in doing so, I was depriving our daughter of a comfortable childhood. Mandy argued that this was grounds for pressing charges against me for neglecting our daughter. Peter was at my door, asking me to hand over our daughter immediately, claiming that they would soon complete the legal procedures to gain custody. He said I was incapable of raising her on my own. I was so enraged by this that I slammed the door in his face and told him to leave, warning that I would call the cops if he didn't. I couldn't believe that Peter thought for a second that he could come to me and demand that I give up our daughter after he had completely ignored us for almost an entire year. I wasn't intimidated by whatever threats Mandy made, because they were baseless. She couldn't just press charges against me for neglecting my daughter simply because I was a single mother. That's ridiculous. I wasn't scared of that, but I was scared of Peter returning and reminding our daughter that he existed. It had been hard enough getting her to forget about her dad, and I didn't want to go through that again. I also didn't like the idea of him having any access to me at all. What he said to me the other day was creepy, and the fact that he didn't think there was anything wrong with what he was suggesting was concerning. I decided to move in with my parents for a while until I felt safe enough to return to living on my own. It would also be convenient for my nanny, who could take a break for a couple of days. 2 days after Peter's reappearance, I moved back in with my parents, and I've been living with them since. I didn't hear from Peter again until 2 days ago, when he showed up at my parents' place. He knew that this was the only other place I was likely to be, but now that I had my mom and dad with me, I felt a lot more confident and ready to confront him. My daughter was fast asleep at the time and was being looked after by my mom upstairs, so no matter how loud I got, she wouldn't be able to hear me. Peter looked upset and told me that they weren't going to press charges anymore, since they couldn't even if they wanted to. However, he still found it unfair that I had taken full custody of our daughter, considering his infidelity. He said that the real reason he came back after so long was that both he and Mandy could feel the void that our daughter's absence had left in their lives. Although our daughter wasn't her biological mother, Mandy had met her several times while Peter and I were still together, and they had begun to think of themselves as her parents. Mandy believed she could have been a good stepmother if I had given her the chance. Peter argued that it was unfair for me to file for full custody, knowing that it was unlikely he would be granted joint custody, especially considering his job, which required long hours and travel. He also admitted that one of the reasons he didn't get full custody was his infidelity, which played a significant role in the custody battle. After the divorce, he had essentially given up and let me have full custody. I honestly didn't understand why he was blaming me for any of this. Peter said he just wanted to reconnect with our daughter, and so did Mandy, which is why they were asking me for another chance. He tried to convince me that letting them be part of our daughter's life would be beneficial for her in the long run, and that I would regret not letting them bond now, when our daughter would demand answers about why she was never allowed to be a part of her father's life. To avoid being blamed in the future, Peter wanted me to let them build a relationship with our daughter. Despite the infidelity, he insisted that he had always been a good father and that Mandy desperately wanted to see her one more time. I didn't know what to say at the time, but I knew for a fact that I didn't feel comfortable letting them be around our daughter. I had zero trust in them. Peter had betrayed me and lied to me for 3 years. That wasn't something I could easily forgive, and Mandy had been complicit in those lies. For them to ask me to let them be part of our daughter's life after everything they'd done seemed ridiculous. I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but I told Peter once again that it was too late to change the past. He needed to accept that our daughter wasn't his anymore, as he had been absent from her life for the last 8 months. It had been difficult enough explaining his absence to her, and I wasn't about to do it again just because he and his wife suddenly wanted to be with her. I told him to leave, and I shut the door. He did leave, but since then, he's been texting me nonstop, trying to persuade me to give them another chance. He keeps insisting that our daughter needs him just as much as she needs me, and that I'll regret my decision when she resents me for not letting him into her life. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by keeping him out of our daughter's life after everything he's done, but I'm standing firm in my decision. Chance to co-parent with me. He said that Mandy was very attached to our daughter and felt that they could provide a better future for her than I could as a single mother. He mentioned that despite the affair and all that had happened, they had both changed, and Mandy genuinely wanted to be a mother to her, especially since she couldn't have children of her own. He seemed to think that by admitting the truth, I might see things from their perspective. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of him to come back after all this time, especially after completely abandoning us, and then act like he was doing me a favor by asking for custody was mind-boggling. Peter kept on with his reasoning, saying that it wasn't about taking my daughter away from me but giving her a better life, and he even suggested that I might eventually regret not letting them be a part of her life. I knew this was his last-ditch attempt to manipulate me, and frankly, I wasn't having it. I felt like they had already done enough damage by betraying me, and I wasn't about to let them walk back into our lives and pretend like nothing happened. I was done being manipulated, and I made it clear that my decision was final. I wasn't going to put my daughter through more confusion just because Peter and Mandy decided they wanted to play family again after abandoning us for so long. So I told Peter again that it was too late to change anything. I was her mother and I had been raising her alone, and that was the way it was going to stay. The past 8 months without him had been difficult, but we had managed to find our own rhythm, and that was how it was going to remain. My daughter had a life without him in it, and I wasn't about to disrupt that just because Peter and Mandy felt guilty now. After I said all of this, Peter's demeanor changed, and he looked like he was about to argue again. But before he could say anything, I told him, "Don't come back here again. If you do, I'll take legal action." He didn't say much after that, and eventually he left. But the texts kept coming. Peter and Mandy didn't give up, and now, I feel like I'm living in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for them to show up again. I've been talking to my lawyer about this, and we're working on getting the necessary documents in place to prevent them from having any further access to my daughter. I know that the law doesn't usually favor extreme measures like blocking a parent's right to visitation unless there's serious reason, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure that my daughter remains safe and out of harm's way. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I can't see any other way to protect her. Peter may have been her father once, but in my eyes, he gave up that right when he abandoned us. Now, it's my job to make sure she has the life she deserves, without interference from him or his new wife.